Hey guys, tonight we're ditching the GPS, the compass, even the concept of north, because you're stepping into the mind of a Pacific navigator, where the ocean isn't a void but a living, breathing map. You're standing barefoot on the woven planks of a voyaging canoe, its hull gently creaking under the weight of silence and expectation. The moon is somewhere behind you, low and indifferent, casting a silver glaze across the ink-black water. Overhead, the sky is impossibly wide, cluttered with stars. Not scattered, but arranged, like notes in a melody only your ancestors truly understood. The canoe nudges forward, gliding smoothly through the stillness. Around you, a few other travelers sit quietly, draped in cloth, their eyes turned upward. No one's talking. Not because it's forbidden, but because it's unnecessary. Everything that needs to be said is already moving above you. In the slow sweep of Orion's belt, in the tilt of the Southern Cross, in the flicker of a satellite that would mean nothing to your great-great-great-grandfather. So you try to see like they did. You lift your head and start to trace arcs, how certain stars rise at the same point each night, then glide across the sky like they're tethered to invisible strings. You notice that one particular bright dot always kisses the horizon just as the wind begins to shift. Coincidence? Not out here. Nothing out here is accidental. You haven't even left sight of land yet, but the map is already unfolding in your mind. There are no lines, no paper, just memory and rhythm. The stars tell you not where to go, but when to go. When Canopus rises, you know the weather will begin to change. When Pleiades sets early, storms may be near. The sky becomes a schedule, and you're keeping appointments older than your island. You shift your gaze down to the horizon, squinting into the velvet dark. There's a faint, pulsing brightness where the sea meets the sky. Your mentor calls it Te Lapa, a strange horizontal lightning some islanders say reveals the direction of nearby islands. Scientists still argue whether it's optical illusion, plankton magic, or something electrical. Whatever it is, it points the way. And tonight, it's pointing you forward. Your fingers tighten around the edge of the canoe. You can smell the salt, the wood, the faint scent of coconut oil. The ocean speaks softly now, with ripples barely brushing the hull. Soon, it will speak louder. In your mind, you begin reciting names of islands, ones you've seen, others you've only heard about in stories. You don't think of them as dots on a map. You think of them as people, each with a voice, a rhythm, a personality. You're not going east. You're going toward Tomako, toward your cousin's laughter, toward the lagoon where the fish practically leap into your hands if you sing the right song. Navigation isn't about distance here. It's about relationship, about intimacy with the sea. Your eyes drift back to the sky. A few stars have already moved since you started watching. You note their new positions, adjust your orientation just slightly. A subtle lean of the paddle. There's a joke your mentor told you the first time you tried to steer the canoe at night. If you don't know where you are, listen to the canoe. It probably does. You laughed, until you realized it was true. Even the canoe knows more than it lets on. You glance behind you, where land has nearly disappeared. But you're not worried. You've already stored the angle of the horizon in your mind. The angle between where Sirius rose and where it sits now. You could retrace your steps by starlight alone if you had to. Some navigators could steer entire crossings with their eyes closed, just feeling the rhythm of the swells and the balance of the boat. Of course, you probably wouldn't survive that. Not yet. But you're learning. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe slides forward again. Your journey has begun. The canoe hums beneath you, gliding into the open Pacific, and now the Real reading begins. Not with your eyes, but with your whole body. You crouch low, press your fingers gently against the hull, and let the motion seep in. The swells are talking tonight. This isn't just water moving under a boat. It's a rolling library of wave types. And each swell has something to say. There's the long, gentle rise that seems to lift you with the patience of an old teacher. That's a dominant swell, born hundreds of miles away, maybe from a storm near Fiji. It's deep, ancient, and unwavering, a sign that you're on track. But then, there it is. A shorter, more jittery vibration shivering through the canoe's belly. A local chop, probably whipped up by wind from a different direction. It tries to interrupt, but the long swell keeps asserting itself underneath, like a parent calming an overexcited child. You begin to parse the layers. Not unlike reading a sentence in a new alphabet. First the bass line, deep swell from the east. Then a second one crosses it, maybe from a distant cyclone spinning far off in the south. That creates a rhythmic crisscross under your feet. You lean left and feel the boat resist. A third pulse intrudes, smaller, tighter, but steady. Now you've got a conversation happening across the water's skin. And you're the translator. In many Pacific languages, there are dozens, sometimes hundreds, of terms for different types of swells. Not just big or small, but ghost swell that follows behind, shy ripple that slides sideways, angry wave with a short temper. You memorize these not from books, but from motion, repetition, correction, and sometimes a very wet lesson when you misread one. One of the old navigators once said the waves are like the breath of the sea gods. If you listen closely enough, you can hear where they're blowing next. Historians still argue whether these swell detection skills were passed through formal training or absorbed through osmosis. Just being out there long enough for the patterns to imprint on muscle and bone. Some researchers say the brain actually builds spatial maps from the vestibular feedback of swells over time. Others think that explanation is too modern, too clean, and that we're still missing something primal. Something spiritual. For now, you just feel. Your eyes are closed now, not in sleep but in focus. The canoe rises, count, 1, 2, 3, dip. Then again. You start whispering the pattern to yourself like a chant. Soon, it'll be in your blood. Eventually, they say, you can tell when you're approaching an island just by noticing when the wave pattern hiccups. There's a myth from one of the outer atolls. A boy once rowed a canoe blindfolded from his home island to another, guided only by the way the waves rebounded. The sea, they say, was so familiar to him, it carried him like a mother carrying a child. Scientists have never proven the story. But they haven't disproven it, either. You crouch again, hand trailing in the water. The surface is warmer than it was a few hours ago. Not by much, but enough. Could be a current from the north brushing in. That would explain the diagonal chop you felt earlier. The wave language isn't just horizontal, it's vertical too. Temperature, pressure, the occasional rogue splash against your shins, they all speak. You just need to stop thinking and start sensing. Another jolt. You brace instinctively. That one came from below and slightly aft. Something shifted. You crawl forward and nudge the edge of the sail. Adjust it by half a palm's width. The boat steadies. The correction feels right. You don't know how you knew, you just did. Later, when you're retelling the voyage, someone will ask how you kept your bearing through the night. You'll shrug. You'll say, I followed the alphabet. And they'll understand. At least, the ones who know what you mean. Far to your left, you notice the swells thickening, slightly. Denser. As if they're running into something invisible. You file it away. Could be a reef. Could be the very beginning of an island's distant underwater shelf. You won't steer toward it yet, but your body remembers the pattern for later. It's all data. You hum a soft tune under your breath, one the old navigator taught you. Not a song to pass time, but a song to mark rhythm. Each beat matches a swell. You'll use it again when stars disappear, or when clouds swallow the moon. The wave alphabet doesn't change, even when the sky does. Your canoe continues onward, unhurried. A low whistle in the rigging tells you the wind is starting to shift. A perfect segue, for next, you'll need to watch the birds. You're up before dawn, curled in the stern like a question mark, listening for wings. Not just any wings, frigate birds, mostly, and the sharp cries of terns. You hear them before you see them, which is good. It means you're alert, still tuned in. The horizon's only just beginning to glow, but already the birds are talking. A low, warbling cackle to the east. A shrill peep overhead. You tilt your head and track it. 1, 2, 3 passes. There. You squint into the dim light and catch the silhouette, slim, black wings shaped like a boomerang slicing across the pale sky. A frigate bird. Elegant, rude, and always reliable. You smile. That bird's not just stretching her wings. She's working. See, birds like frigates don't land on the open ocean. They can't. Their feathers aren't waterproof like a duck's, and their bodies are built for soaring, not bobbing. So if you see one circling, swooping low, then pulling back toward a single direction, you follow it. Because it's following land. They've been called the daytime compasses of the Pacific. And unlike your cousin's smartphone, they don't need charging. One old navigator, who refused to use GPS even when he was gifted a tablet, once said, "You trust the birds because they don't care if you get lost. They're just going home." You watch as the frigate turns again, its arc tighter now. If it keeps doing that, you'll know there's a fish boil or maybe a floating log nearby. Some small feature of the sea that could help you verify where you are. But if she breaks formation and heads straight west, you'll have to make a choice. Trust your gut or trust the bird. Right now, the swell you've been riding all night says keep going northwest. But the bird disagrees. You keep watching. You're not just bird watching, you're interpreting. Like reading a sentence that constantly rearranges itself. Terns, for example, rarely fly more than 40 kilometers from land. If they start popping up around you like nosy neighbors, you're within range. Historians still argue whether Pacific navigators mapped bird patterns as systematically as some oral traditions claim. Some think it was more intuition than science, an instinct passed down with experience and reinforced by the occasional miracle story. Others argue that it was a full-on, bird-based GPS system, honed over centuries. The truth, as usual, is probably both. There's a legendary tale from Kiribati about a canoe lost in thick fog for 5 days. With no stars and no wind, the crew was disoriented, starting to panic. Then one man pointed out a line of nadas flying high, just barely visible in a break in the clouds. He swore he recognized their afternoon route. They followed. By nightfall, they saw land. And here's the kicker. Later, a local elder heard the story and said, "Ah yes, that's the Tuesday route. They always fly that way before storms." So now you listen. You notice not just direction, but speed, angle, altitude. Are the birds climbing? Leveling out? Do they look restless or relaxed? Are they alone or in a line? You begin to chart the invisible lines above the sea, using birds like pencil marks in a sketch. And even though they'll vanish from sight soon, back to their perches, their nests, their hidden lagoons, you'll keep their message stored in your head. Frigate cuts left again, then disappears. But another comes in, this time a tern, wings flapping fast, darting low to the water's surface. That's a good sign. You're near a reef edge. Terns like to hunt small fish pushed upward by coral shelves. You lean over the side of your canoe and dip your hand in the water again. Yep, cooler here. Shallower. You're definitely approaching a new underwater feature. A third bird zips overhead. Its path aligns with the others. You sketch the angle in your head, align it with the swell you felt earlier, and suddenly you're no longer guessing. You're triangulating. By breakfast, you've built a mental map entirely from birds and waves. A pod of dolphins surfaces nearby. Seriously, could it get any more on the nose? They chatter, dive, vanish. You won't follow them. Dolphins are notoriously unreliable tour guides. But their presence tells you something else. The ecosystem's shifting. More life means you're getting close to something. Maybe land. Maybe just a sandbar. Maybe a seaweed field pretending to be something more exciting. Still, you record it in your mind. You break open a small bundle of dried fruit, chew slowly, and glance upward one more time. The clouds are starting to form strange streaks overhead. You file that away too. Birds, waves, light, temperature. The ocean is speaking in all directions. You just have to keep listening. Tomorrow, you'll learn to read the clouds. By midday, your forehead's kissed with salt and the horizon's a bright blur, but your eyes stay skybound. Because now it's the clouds talking. Back home, clouds are just looks like rain or Instagram worthy. But out here, they're narrative, texture, forecast, and sometimes direction. You stare long enough and the sky becomes a second ocean. It swells slower, its currents stranger. Somewhere behind you, your canoe makes that soft, hollow clap against a wave trough, your background beat. But your attention is pinned overhead, following the pale tower of a cumulonimbus rising over what must be open sea. You've seen that kind before. The kind that shows off but doesn't commit, your uncle once joked. And then, to the west, a smudge. Low, dark, and puffy, sitting unusually still. You squint harder. That's not just a cloud. That's a reef island's vapor signature. Here's the thing. Islands affect clouds. An atoll or lagoon warms the air above it, and that slightly hotter air causes condensation. Result. Clouds form directly over land or hover slightly inland like celestial beacons. So if you can recognize the type, and more importantly, its behavior, you can essentially see islands before you see them. Historians still argue whether early Pacific navigators had a formal cloud classification system or whether it was more of a poetic shorthand passed down through chants and metaphors. But the observational accuracy? Unquestionable. That low, still puffball? That's your clue. You tilt your head and match it against the swell angle, the previous bird patterns, and your mental tide clock. Everything lines up. You note the color, too. Grayish base, slightly yellow glow at the top. That could mean land with shallow reefs, sunlight bouncing off the coral and creating this odd glow. Or possibly vegetation. Either way, it's worth steering toward, even if just to confirm. You shift your paddle slightly, make the tiniest correction. And just as you do, the wind picks up, like it's giving you a little sarcastic, finally. Another cluster of clouds begins forming to the southeast. Wispy, thin, no land under that one. Probably cold ocean underneath. Nothing worth your time. But you watch them anyway, in case they change. Clouds are moody like that. There's a legend from Tonga about a navigator who read clouds like a wife's face. Which, depending on who tells it, is either a compliment or a warning. You remember your training chant. Softly now, barely a whisper. Flat-bottomed cloud, morning low, home is close. Long trail cloud, midday high, danger below. Stacked towers, far and slow, storm will grow. You murmur it again. Not because you need it, but because the rhythm keeps you steady. Clouds tell you more than direction. They whisper timing, velocity, hidden reefs. One navigator once claimed he could smell a typhoon 3 days before the skies agreed with him. Was it the clouds? The air pressure? Some sixth sailor sense? Historians debate, but no one could match his survival record. You note the color shift in the east. Cloud undersides now tinged with silver. Afternoon sun's angle is bouncing off water differently. You're entering a new oceanic zone. And now the sky feels heavier. Literally. The air presses against your skin in that slow, thick way it does before a squall. Your paddle's drag changes slightly as the swell shifts pace. You glance upward. Sure enough, anvil-shaped clouds are forming. You're not panicked though. You expected this. You already know where to steer to avoid the brunt of it. Why? Because the cloud told you first. That's something satellite data can't replicate. The feel. The texture of real-time sky. The intuitive awareness that comes from decades, generations, of watching clouds perform their long, wordless play. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some Polynesian canoes used small polished coconut shells to mirror the sky. Like pocket-sized planetariums. Navigators would gaze into them at sunrise and sunset to compare cloud glow patterns. Portable meteorology, minus the annoying app notifications. You try the same now, glancing into the water's reflection instead. The clouds ripple in the mirror of the sea, shapes distorted but still readable. It's not about clarity, it's about familiarity. And like a painter stepping back to see the whole canvas, you get a better sense of direction from this low angle. A slow exhale leaves your lips. You can almost taste rain in the back of your throat. Not yet, but soon. You pull a light cloth over your shoulder, sun still biting. The canoe rocks gently, not protesting. Your crewmate shifts behind you, mutters something about the birds slacking off today. You smirk. They did their bit, you say. Now it's the clouds' turn. Far ahead, a new shape begins to form on the horizon. You're not sure if it's real or mirage. Doesn't matter. You'll let the clouds confirm it. And when they do, you'll know you're on the right path. You look back up, eyes soft, mind alert. The sky, your ceiling of signs, stretches wide and layered. And you're fluent now. You're not paddling now, you're painting lines across the dark. The sun's gone, but your map just got sharper. Night has fallen, but it hasn't blinded you. Not even close. It's when things get easier, in a way. Because now the sky isn't cluttered. It's organized. Precise. Like someone cleaned up the mess of daytime and gave you a fresh blackboard dusted with stars. You settle deeper into your seat, legs steady, hands loose but ready. The ocean feels cooler, like it's exhaling, and your ears adjust to the night rhythm. Nocturnal waves, insect-like clicks from fish below, and your crew's occasional sighs. But mostly, you're watching. Because night is a canvas. And tonight, the stars are painting you a trail. There's a reason master navigators preferred traveling at night. It sounds counterintuitive, no light, no landmarks, but that's the thing. You don't need landmarks when you know the sky by heart. You know exactly where Sirius should rise, how the Southern Cross rotates as hours pass, and which star paths should arch directly above your hull depending on where you're headed. Star paths. That's the term. Not constellations, not zodiac fluff. Paths. Routes. You memorize them like freeways. You've practiced this for years. Lying on your back, chanting stars into muscle memory, blinking through rain just to see if the horizon arc feels right. And now here you are mid-ocean, with Orion tilted just so, and you know, you're still on track. A fringe detail. Some navigators trained by staring at a single star for hours to develop star fixation, the ability to hold one celestial point steady while everything else moved. Try that sometime and see if your eyeballs don't revolt. Your eyes drift upward. There's Altair, bright and lonely. To your left, Vega winks faintly through low haze. Both belong to rising arcs, tracks pointing vaguely north. You aren't going north, but they give you context. Anchors in the sky. Meanwhile, your steering star tonight is Canopus, brilliant and serene. When it's dead ahead, your canoe should be slicing southwest. But here's the magic. As it tilts westward through the night, your heading adjusts, too. You follow it like a trailing kite string. There's no blinking cursor telling you where you are. Just patterns. Memory. Trust. You become part of the sky's rhythm. You aren't checking your direction every few minutes. You're gliding with it, like a satellite that doesn't need recalibration. Now, here's where it gets nerdy. Every star rises and sets at a unique point on the horizon. These rise-set points are what the Micronesians call itak. And each attack becomes a point on your mental map. It's not north, south, east, west. It's, this island lines up with that star when it hits that point. Historians still argue whether attack were fixed to islands or relative to canoe movement, but most agree it was a flexible mental framework. A moving map without paper, ink, or glass. So, you lean back, trace the sky's symmetry. Your mind does the math in a lazy kind of way. If Vega sets just after midnight, and you've been traveling since dusk, that means your east drift is minimal. Maybe the swell's been nudging you slightly south. You correct by adjusting your paddle rhythm. Not dramatically. Just enough to feel the canoe tilt half a degree. This is the kind of correction GPS can't teach you. It's not numbers. It's sensation. Gut. The way the stars look when the water feels a certain way. It's why some traditional navigators say they can smell when they're off course. Oh, and here's a fun one. Some navigators swore they could hear certain star directions. Not because stars make sound, obviously, but because the canoe creaks differently when you're aligned with a particular swell star combo. If you've done this long enough, the difference becomes audible. Real or placebo? Still debated. Either way, it works. You shift your weight again. There's a break in the clouds. A streak of the Milky Way splashes overhead, your ultimate reference line. That band of light, full of stars too tiny to name, splits the sky from southwest to northeast. You've used it before as a backup when your lead stars hide. Tonight, it's your spotlight. Bright, confident, quietly showing you the way. Your crewmate stirs beside you. He mutters something half asleep, asking what time it is. You just point to a cluster above the horizon. Same as always. You whisper, "Time to go home." Because when the sky is this clear, time isn't on a clock. It's in the angle of Orion's belt. It's in how far Scorpius has drifted toward the western edge. It's a moving watch you don't strap on, you sleep beneath it. And tonight, everything is exactly where it should be. You smile slightly, feeling the canoe glide effortlessly forward. Stars above, swell below, and your body remembering every lesson it's ever learned. The night isn't hiding the world from you. It's revealing it. You don't see the island, but the ocean tells you it's there. There's no smell of smoke, no birds circling, no silhouette on the horizon. Just water. An endless field of ripples under a quilt of stars. But your skin twitches. Your legs tense. Because something about the way the canoe moves has changed. You've entered the shadow of a landmass you can't see. Swell shadows, they're your secret weapon now. The phenomenon sounds like wizardry to outsiders, detecting invisible islands by the way ocean waves bend, bounce, or split. But you've trained for this. You've rehearsed in mock voyages, squinting at chop angles, testing steering corrections. Tonight, you're not rehearsing. You're reading a hidden signature written in salt water. Here's how it works. Swells, those deep, slow-moving waves born hundreds of miles away, move in near-perfect lines. You know what they feel like when undisturbed. But put an island in their path, and things get weird. They split, curve around it, sometimes reflect off its coasts. Now picture this, you're dozens of miles out, and one leg of the canoe begins lifting half a second too early, every third wave or so. That's not random. That's refraction, a bend in the wave pattern as it snakes around the unseen island. You adjust your course slightly, almost as a test. The pulse smooths. You're onto something. A mainstream fact. Ancient navigators from the Marshall Islands actually built physical maps to represent this. Stick charts. Thin palm ribs tied together to show how swells refract around atolls. They didn't show land locations directly. They showed how waves change when land is nearby. You've studied those charts like sacred texts. Of course, you don't carry one with you. They're teaching tools, not navigation instruments. The real map is your body. You felt the ghost bump before, when the canoe dips, not because of wind or weight, but because a wave just echoed back off a distant reef. It feels like stepping on a loose stair tread. Quick, subtle, and unsettling unless you know what it means. Historians still argue whether navigators could actually predict island location this way, or if it was more intuition and experience stitched together. But that's the thing. Experience is data. You've crossed this channel before. You know how the swells usually behave. Tonight, they're different. That means something. Now you get tactile. You lie belly down on the hull, cheek pressed to the wood. You close your eyes. Let the ocean speak through your bones. That vibrating shift beneath your ribs, that's not random. It's patterned. And you've cataloged those patterns. The rhythm tells you, there's a landmass due southeast. probably 25 nautical miles out. You whisper the direction to your crewmate. He doesn't question you. A quirky detail. Some elders say if you're truly in tune with the water, you'll dream of islands before you reach them. That the swell's signature invades your sleep. That you'll see a specific tree or bird in your mind the night before landfall. Sounds mystical, but you've had dreams that eerily matched the islands you landed on later. Coincidence? Maybe, but you take note of your dreams, just in case. Back to the swells. You've noticed a second set now, running at a sharper diagonal. That's not just another wind pattern. It's a rebound. 2 different directions? That's a sure sign there's something big up ahead redirecting the waves. You're triangulating now. The first bend told you southeast. The second pulse confirms it. You feel the canoe lean slightly again. Not from wind, but from counterwave. You mark the timing in your head. Every 7 heartbeats. Consistent. That's your pulse map. You start counting aloud. 1, 2, 3, wave. 1, 2, 3, wave again. The interval is steady, which means the obstacle, the island, isn't drifting. It's stationary, or you're headed right toward it. Some nights, you chase swells that lie, reflections off passing storms, or rogue currents shaped by deep-sea ridges. But this feels clean, predictable. And now, the real test. You shift the canoe 5 degrees to port. Just a nudge. 5 minutes pass. The second set of pulses weakens. You smile. That confirms it. The bend fades when you drift away from the source. So, you return to your previous heading. Dead on toward that unseen land. You don't need to see it to believe it. There's a confidence that comes with this kind of navigation. Not cocky, more like attuned. You don't wait for land to announce itself. You feel for it. Listen for it. And the sea, if it respects you, answers. Remember that trick about lying flat on the deck? Some say the best navigators could feel the difference in wood tension when the hull passed into a swell shadow. That even the materials of the canoe reacted. Whether that's myth or muscle memory, you're not sure. But tonight, the deck does feel different. A lull settles in. The stars stay steady. You hum a chant under your breath. Not for rhythm but for presence. A way to ground yourself in motion. And then, quietly, your crewmate points. A flicker. Not a light. A shape. Something ever so slightly darker than the night sky behind it. Barely there. But yes. A silhouette. Low. Almost invisible. But there. Land. You caught it before your eyes did. Before your brain could doubt. You trusted the shadow the waves whispered, and it brought you home. You shift your weight ever so slightly, the smooth hull creaking beneath your bare feet. The night air wraps around you like a thin shawl of salt and humidity, and the sea stretches endlessly ahead, inky and breathing. The stars above are sharp tonight. Good. You need them to be. Because this is where your ancestors once whispered the names of the stars into their paddles and set out across black water, trusting that the sky would lead them true. There's a name for every light up there, and more importantly, a use. Celestial crossings. They sound romantic, right? But to you, they're more like street signs in a place without streets. You stare at the eastern horizon, just where it kisses the sea, and wait. There's a specific star you're watching for, and when it lifts itself over the lip of the world, just barely, you'll know you're lined up exactly with the route that'll carry you between 2 islands separated by hundreds of miles of empty ocean. Historians call it star-rise navigation, but you just call it Tuesday. Hey, remember how in school you might have learned about the Big Dipper or Orion's Belt? Pacific navigators saw those, sure, but they had different names, different meanings. For example, Sirius, known as Kaulua in some Polynesian traditions, was more than just the brightest star. It was a timekeeper, a marker, a silent drumbeat announcing when certain routes opened like seasonal doorways across the sea. Tonight, you're watching for Rahua, the red star. When it appears just left of your prow at a specific time of year, it means you're on course for a chain of islands barely visible even in daylight. You adjust the angle of your steering paddle ever so slightly, correcting for the breeze. Your body has memorized this ritual. You barely need to think anymore. Your arms and legs respond to the sky. The trick isn't just knowing which star is which. It's knowing where it's supposed to rise. The stars don't drift randomly across the sky. They follow strict paths, as if pulled on invisible strings. You've watched them night after night until they burned behind your eyelids. You can tell when something's off. 1 degree of misalignment over 500 miles? Yeah, you're not just lost, you're in someone else's ocean. What's really wild? These stellar alignments were so deeply encoded into oral maps that the names of stars were also the names of islands, directions, and even the moods of certain voyages. Some were thought to rise joyfully, others, solemnly. You paddle under constellations that are less scientific diagram and more family tree. But don't picture this like GPS where you just plug in a destination and go. The star is your entry point, but staying on course? That takes constant recalibration. And here's a fun twist. Different navigators, even from neighboring islands, sometimes used different stars for the same route. Historians still argue whether this was due to subtle regional differences in technique or just good old-fashioned family pride. Take the route between Samoa and Tokelau. One navigator might swear by a star that rises a hair north of east in late November, while another swears by its dimmer cousin trailing behind it. Who's right? Both, maybe. The ocean's like that. It rewards conviction almost as much as precision. Now, here's the fringe bit. There are whispers, unconfirmed of course, that some of the truly elite navigators could see invisible stars. Not in the mystical sense, but in the sense that their eyes and minds were so attuned to atmospheric distortions and star haze that they could pick up on celestial cues others didn't even register. Imagine being so used to stargazing that your subconscious knows a constellation is coming before it rises. Kinda like how a musician can hear the next note before it's played. You're drifting now, but it's intentional. You let the canoe breathe for a minute, using the swell to keep yourself oriented. The wind grazes your cheek. Somewhere behind you, a young crewmate sneezes. Everyone's quiet, though. You all know this moment matters. The stars don't just rise and fall, they cross. That's the key. When you align your canoe so that 2 specific stars are side by side on the horizon, you've created a corridor. That corridor is your ocean. It may look the same as any other direction, but it's not. It's encoded with all the memories of those who sailed it before. Ever played Connect the Dots as a kid? Same concept, just stretched over a hemisphere. Your elders taught you that when the star Puana crosses directly overhead while Mataralii begins to rise in the east, you're perfectly angled for a route that leads to a safe harbor, so long as you sail for 6 nights and never break pace. 6 nights. No land. No turning back. You'd think you'd doubt the stars by night 3, but you don't. You trust the crossings, because they've always been there, and they always will be. Sometimes, it's not even about using the stars for one trip. You remember that older voyager, Tamatoa, who taught you how some expeditions could plan entire migrations based on the cycles of the Pleiades. When they disappeared from the night sky, that was the cue to leave. When they returned, it meant the islands behind you were out of season, and the ones ahead were blooming. The sea is your road, and the stars are the traffic lights. Of course, things get dicey when clouds roll in. That's when you shift to backup systems. Remember our friends the birds and the waves? But tonight, the sky is clear, and that means everything rides on your ability to read the heavens like a first-century Uber map. Not all stars are created equal, either. Some are steady, others twinkle too much to trust. You avoid those. You've even heard stories, half joking, that certain stars are liars, their light bouncing oddly through the atmosphere. Never trust a liar star, your uncle once said, handing you a piece of dried breadfruit and looking deeply suspicious of the entire constellation of Capricorn. Another thing you've learned? Star paths aren't just lines. They're arcs. You watch them rise, climb, and fall, and from that dance, you predict everything from your latitude to your arrival time. If a certain star drops behind your right shoulder an hour before dawn, you're on schedule. If it's still visible at sunrise, you're late, or the tide's playing tricks. Ever heard of sidereal time? Probably not unless you're an astronomy geek. But it's the concept that helps navigators like you track star positions by a cosmic clock, not just a nightly one. That's why two different star paths that look the same tonight might mean totally different things next month. Your brain keeps all that in balance while your arms paddle, and your ears stay tuned to the ocean's whispers. You're not just sailing. You're syncing with the sky. And here's something sweet. In some traditions, when two stars cross paths in the sky, briefly, beautifully, it's seen as a blessing. A sign of alignment, not just of direction, but of purpose. You whisper a quiet thank you into the dark, not really knowing who you're thanking. Maybe the ancestors. Maybe the stars themselves. Still, nothing's guaranteed out here. You remember last season, when a rival canoe missed its celestial crossing by a day and ended up circling for 2 weeks, hoping for a lucky bird or rogue cloud to save them. They survived, sure. But they came back quieter, humbled. Tonight, you aim to do better. Your star is rising. The canoe shifts under you, as if it too can feel the turning of the earth. You dip your paddle, not to move forward, but to affirm your path. You know where you're going. You always did. You lean forward, eyes scanning the water's surface as if it's a living tapestry drifting beneath the stars. The canoe rocks gently, and you feel the whisper of swell beneath your thighs. It's past midnight, and the ocean is a vast, riddled puzzle, but those pieces of flotsam floating alongside your hull are its most reliable landmarks. Driftwood landmarks. They sound humble, right? Yet tonight, they're your breadcrumb trail across thirds of an ocean expanse. Every twig, branch, or half-sunken coconut husk tells a story. You notice the slender branch shaped like a crooked finger pointing north, your route. You grip its orientation without thinking, adjusting your heading by a hair. A mainstream fact. Ancient Pacific mariners carried driftwood charts, actual collections of labeled wood fragments strapped to their decks to train novice navigators in recognizing origin zones, a practice still taught in some traditional voyaging schools today. You remember that from a workshop on Clee's revival voyages, those modern voyagers resurrecting ancestral techniques. Casting your mind back to the star crossings, you realize that driftwood works in tandem with celestial cues. If Rahua, the red star, rose slightly off course earlier, the arrival of that familiar drift log confirms you're still on track. You probably think, driftwood as GPS. Sure, why not? But think about it. Currents carry debris in surprisingly predictable patterns. Fringe whispers even suggest that elite navigators could smell differences in wood grain before identifying their origin. Historians still argue whether that's folklore or fact. A battered branch floats by, its bark stripped to reveal pale wood. You recall it likely came from Ilong Ilong, common on islands dozens of miles east. That branch drifted in around 30 days of current flow, meaning you've averaged a steady pace. You punch the water with your paddle in a steady rhythm, each stroke a quiet affirmation. Driftwood, stars, waves, they all speak the same language if you listen closely enough. You lean further, almost grazing the water, and spot a ring of tiny floats clinging to a snapped vine. That vine, probably breadfruit, untethered upstream near a river mouth hundreds of miles away. The circular floats formed as gas pockets trapped in seed pods rose and became vessels themselves. You recall reading how Polynesians sometimes tied seed pods to hulls as makeshift buoys. Quirky tidbit, but it speaks volumes about adaptation. You trace the vine's path. It likely traveled via the northward flowing equatorial current before veering south as it approached your corridor. That confirms not just direction but helps you gauge drift intensity. Stronger currents mean shorter travel time for wood, which means you're either early or late relative to your timing. You whisper to yourself, adjusting your paddle angle by half a degree. You've done this so many times your body reacts before thought. It's remarkably silent save for the creak of wood and lap of waves. Yet every drift marker seems to hum with story. That hollowed coconut, smoothed to a perfect sphere, probably washed off an atoll after a storm surge. You imagine its journey, uprooted palm, tumbling over coral reefs, pummeled by waves for weeks, then gently nudged into your path. Historians still argue whether early navigators actively sought such coconuts for water reserves or merely used them as navigational byproducts. The canoe responds to your shift. You sit back and stretch your arms, winking at the drifting objects as if they're old friends. You recall the wave alphabet, how you decode swells, and now you marry that skill to driftwood observation. The branch that drifts parallel to the swell crests indicates the current's axis. The bits swirling in eddies near your hull hint at local turbulence over submerged reefs. Two systems in harmony, celestial corridors overhead, flotsam signposts below. Another drift piece catches your eye, a sliver of bamboo, bleached white and scored with tiny teeth marks. You pause. Shipworms, those wood-boring mollusks, feast on floating timber, leaving telltale grooves. You inspect the pattern. Large, uneven grooves signal exposure of roughly 40 days. Smaller, parallel tracks hint at longer oceanic travel. By combining these clues with your tidal notebooks, you refine your ETA down to hours. In the hush, you crack a joke. If these branches could talk, they'd probably complain about seasickness. The crewmate snorts again, drawing comfort in camaraderie. Shared silence and laughter, they're both integral wayfinding tools. A sudden glint on the horizon distracts you, a lone lantern bobbing on a fishing raft miles off course. But you ignore it. Driftwood never lies. You've learned that human lights can mislead tired eyes. You paddle on, trusting wood over whimsy. Up ahead, you spot a cluster of small sticks forming a natural line, angled just west of north. You calculate, that line corresponds to a current eddy created where two major flows converge. You anchor that insight alongside your star-crossing data. The fusion of driftwood landmarks with celestial crossings makes your mental map doubly robust, like switching from basic GPS to satellite navigation in one stroke. The breeze picks up. More debris floats past, a fibrous husk from a pandanus leaf, a charred log fragment perhaps from an island burn-off. Each element has its own story arc, and you piece them together in real time, stitching a tapestry of place, time, and motion. You're no longer just paddling, you're conversing with the sea. Then, as if on cue, you spot one final piece, a long, slender sapling branch etched with tiny barnacle scars. It's pointing almost exactly northeast, just a hair shy of your previous star alignment. You nudge the canoe's prow gently, aligning that flotsam pointer with the spine of your vessel. Tonight, that quiet recalibration means the difference between arriving at the coral atoll you seek or missing it by 50 miles. You close your eyes for a heartbeat, feeling the canoe's tune shift ever so slightly. Trust the wood. Trust the waves. Trust the sky. You sit back up, nodding to yourself. Your driftwood landmarks have spoken again. You know where you are. You know where you're going. The sky hangs like black silk above you, stitched with the light of 1,000 stars. But tonight, your eyes are on the surface. Not because you've lost your bearings, on the contrary, you're tuned in. Your body leans ever so slightly to one side, feeling the way the canoe is being nudged. It's not the wind. It's the water underneath, humming like a quiet drum. You're listening for something invisible. This is the heart of it, cross-swell navigation. Reading where different wave systems collide, and what that subtle, silent turbulence tells you. You adjust your posture. There's a long, slow undulation from the southeast that's been consistent all night. That's your primary swell. It's reliable, like a beat you've paddled to for hours. But now, there's another motion, gentler, shorter, slicing across it from the northeast. It's faint but unmistakable, like two rhythms playing at once. That's the cross swell, and it's whispering to you. Mainstream fact here, Pacific navigators used these intersecting wave patterns like crossroads. When two distinct swells met at an angle, the interference created tiny pyramid-like peaks called clapotis. Experienced voyagers could feel those changes with their hips or hear the altered splash at the bow. You lean into them like a dance partner, adjusting your angle based on their rhythm. Each tiny bump is part of a language the ocean has been speaking for millennia. You stretch your legs, easing a cramp, and feel a distinct tug on your starboard side. No visual cue, just the pressure shift. That means the secondary swell is strengthening. Could be wind changes near some island far away, or the aftershocks of a distant storm. You file that away. Historians still argue whether ancient navigators identified wave origins by instinct, or whether there was an exact science behind how those cross swells were catalogued and remembered. You know it's both. Let's get into the real texture now. You feel the cross swell's interval. It bumps you every 6 seconds, while the dominant swell does it every 10. That's your pattern, 10:6. You log it mentally. Sure, you could have gone to music school, but ocean algebra is free and has better views. The rhythm isn't just data, it's direction. A 6-second wave from the northeast usually traces back to equatorial zones during transitional seasons. You don't just know that, you feel it. Now you sit lower, feet tucked, and rest your hands lightly on the outrigger beams. Feel the vibration. Not just from the waves, but how the cross swell disrupts the normal flow of water along the hull. You're measuring interference patterns with your butt, basically. A strange talent, sure, but it beats being lost. You recall how your mentor taught you to visualize the waves like ropes laid across the sea. One rope from the southeast, long and thick, pulling you forward. Another from the northeast, thinner but fast, brushing against it at a slant. Where they rub, the water is restless. That restlessness is a clue. It means something's bending the swells, somewhere far ahead, an island, a reef, or just a stubborn underwater ridge. A fringe tidbit for you. In certain Marshallese traditions, some navigators were known to sleep in specially designed canoes, their dreams said to interpret cross-swell information more purely. Some claimed the unconscious mind could read turbulence better than the waking one. It sounds bizarre, but as your body dips into semi-drowsiness, you think, maybe there's something to that. You wake yourself with a stretch. The clapotis you've been feeling grows sharper, no longer rounded humps, but sharper interference. You correct the canoe 2 degrees to port, following the angle where the swells converge. Don't try this on a cruise ship, unless you enjoy veering into Fiji unexpectedly. The stars above reflect on the water's surface. They shimmer, but it's not just pretty. When the cross swell disturbs the main swell, the star reflections wobble in specific ways. One trick you use, look at the reflected light of a bright star like Sirius. If its shimmer quivers in small, fast ripples, that's cross-swell influence. You adjust again. You remember a moment from a childhood training sail, lying belly down in a canoe as elders yelled positions, left, now center, right, while you tried to describe the wave's motion with your hips. You grumbled then. Now, you're grateful. Cross swells also help when you're nearing land you can't yet see. The primary swell might pass around an island cleanly, but the cross swell breaks into chop as it rebounds from cliffs or shoals. You're still hours away, but already the cross swell feels jittery, no longer uniform. That's the first sign of nearby terrain. A clue. Not definitive, but suggestive. Historians still argue whether these subtle disruptions were named in oral maps or passed on through pure feel. You lean toward naming. It sticks better. Suddenly, a splash. One of the crew shifts and drops something into the water. You look back, mildly annoyed. Sorry, they whisper. You shrug. The silence returns. But now you're on edge, not from fear, just tuned in. Was that noise loud enough to mask a sudden cross-swell change? You refocus, letting the paddle drag for a moment. The angle has shifted again, barely, perhaps a fraction of a degree. But it's enough. By now, your body is a seismograph. You make micro-adjustments without thinking. Canoe slightly left. Paddle blade flatter. Foot repositioned for balance. You feel the way the swells cancel each other out or amplify each other in pulses. You murmur, hug the harmony, dodge the noise. It makes no sense aloud, but in your chest, it lands. Cross swells are like passive-aggressive texts from the ocean. Read carefully, or end up ghosted in the middle of nowhere. Your head tilts, eyes closed again. You trust yourself now more than ever. The cross swell confirms your heading, speaks of distant land, warns of obstructions ahead. You don't know where exactly, not yet. But the water is talking. And you're finally fluent. You settle into the subtle symphony of your canoe's hull against the water, listening for a change so faint it could almost be your heartbeat. Reef echoes. Tonight, they're your underwater sonar, the sound signatures rifling beneath your hull like a secret code. You lean forward, fingertips grazing the wooden deck, tuning every nerve ending to the tide's percussion. The ocean is speaking, you just have to hear it. It starts as a gentle brightness in the low-frequency rumble, waves breaking over shallow coral, miles away, sending faint reverberations through the water column. A mainstream fact: Pacific navigators of old placed their ears directly against the hull to detect these reef-borne sounds, a technique still honored by revival crews today. You remember your grandmother teaching you to cup your hand behind your ear and listen, as if the hull were a giant seashell whispering distant shores. Tonight you hear two layers: the steady roll of deep ocean swell and, beneath it, the sharper staccato tap of reef break. It's like distant applause, irregular but magnetic. Fringe travelers sometimes claimed these echoes carried melodies. Some said you could identify specific reef passes by their tune. Historians still argue whether these melodic descriptions were metaphor or genuine acoustic recognition. You don't care. You know the difference between coral tongues and sandy mouths by ear alone. You shift your weight, tilting the canoe ever so slightly to port, increasing contact with the thicker swell so the hull vibrates more. The reef echo grows louder, a higher pitch that tickles your ear. This means the reef crest is approaching, its shallow banks scattering wave energy into sharper notes. You tighten your core, steadying the paddle. Your mind catalogs the interval between deep thump and reef snap, roughly 2.5 seconds tonight, which matches the pass near the unlit atoll ahead. Your crewmate glances at you. You give a barely perceptible nod and say if Yamaha made boats, they'd market reef echoes as surround sound. They smirk, then focus back on the hum beneath their feet. You recall the demonstration on Rapa Nui. Elders placed bamboo poles in water near reef breaks and listened through hollow gourds. Those gourd amplifiers transformed muted crashes into distinct pops and pops into rolling timpani. You practiced that exercise until you could close your eyes and tell which side of the reef you were on. Now, in the dark, under a blanket of stars, you rely on memory and flesh. The echo modulates again. Longer, gentler splashes interspersed with sudden crackles. That's the hallmark of a fringing reef with multiple channels. A single break would be a steady drumbeat. This is a complex rhythm, telling you the passage cuts like a zigzag. You steer accordingly, angling toward where the echoes thin, indicating a deeper channel safe for your keel. Fringe whispers suggest some navigators used shells pressed to the hull as ear trumpets for extra clarity. Historians still argue whether that practice ever really existed or was a colorful myth. You lean in, drawing breath. The scent of warm coral mucus. Yes, coral exudes an almost sweet aroma at night. Drifts up, blending with your sweat and salt. You exhale slowly. This is the moment where senses converge: echo, smell, and star alignments from earlier. You trust the reef's voice more than any lantern or compass. You know you're in the right corridor. A sudden hushed shift in the echo, an almost inaudible lull, signals the deeper channel opening. You adjust your paddle, angling the canoe's prow just enough to slip through the reef's teeth. The echoes fade behind you, replaced by the open roll of lagoon swell, softer, gentler. You've passed the barrier, guided by nothing but sound. You sit upright and stretch your arms, the hull's vibration now uniform once more. Behind you, the reef echoes grow distant. Ahead, the atoll awaits in moonlit silence. You smile in the dark. You settle back, letting the canoe drift into a gentle lull, and press your palm against the hull as if you're feeling a pulse. Tide diaries. Tonight, they're your living calendar, a rhythm scribbled in saltwater, guiding you through channels that would otherwise shred your hull on unseen shoals. You watch the water's edge cling to exposed coral as the tide ebbs, and you know that within the next hour, a safe passage will open like a breathing mouth. A mainstream fact: generations of Pacific navigators kept meticulous oral logs of tidal heights and timings, noting when ocean currents reversed in moon phases to time departures and entrances to lagoon entrances safely. Your own journal is mental, an atlas of ebb and flow committed to memory, cross-referenced with star positions and driftwood markers. You feel the slight drag as the tide turns eastward, nudging you toward the channel. It's a slow, almost glacial shift, but unmistakable. The water's height at the hull changes by finger widths every 20 minutes. You glance at the horizon where moonlight pools on the water, and you recall a fringe tidbit. Some elders swear that during spring tides, the ocean briefly sings in low-frequency hums you can hear in the bones. Historians still argue whether this was metaphorical or actual acoustic phenomena. You press your ear to a dry coconut shell wedged under the seat, your makeshift tide microphone, and interpret the muted rumble as the telltale growl of returning waters. Your crewmate leans in and whispers, "How do you know it won't surprise us with a rogue wave?" You grin. This tide's as predictable as my auntie's gossip at a family reunion. You both chuckle in the hush. The swell shifts slightly, and you sense the channel's entrance ahead, marked only by a subtle seam in the wave patterns where the deeper lagoon water meets the open sea's swell. Remember that reef echo from earlier? Now it's softened, replaced by the hollow resonance of deep water rushing through a narrow pass. The tide diary in your mind flashes an image of the last full moon 2 weeks ago, when you noted the timing. High tide here at midnight, low tide just before dawn. Tonight, you're just past low, entering the channel while the shallow coral shelf is momentarily revealed, preventing you from hitting bottom. You dip your paddle quietly, timing each stroke to coincide with the incoming tide's push. You break the silence by saying, "This is like surfing, except the wave is a calendar." Your crewmate stifles a laugh, eyes wide as they watch the channel's mouth appear and disappear with each pulse of water. Keeping a mental log, you note the tide's velocity, about 2 knots now, slowing as it turns. You'll want to move fast through the shallowest stretch, but too fast. You risk losing control. You modulate your strength, paddling in long, smooth pulls. The water around the hull darkens as it deepens, then lightens again as it shoals. You track these light changes by moon glow, gauging depth in meters without a single instrument. A quirky tradition. In some Micronesian languages, every river mouth carried a tide god name, recited before passage for good fortune. Historians still argue whether these were genuine deities or mnemonic devices. You murmur the old chant under your breath as you slip through the narrowest gap, half believing the tide will heed it. The channel walls, low coral on either side, whisper against the hull as the water rushes through. You inhale the briny scent of seaweed exposed during low tide and exhale slowly. Your arms and core burn slightly, but you pace yourself because you know from your tide diary that you have 15 minutes before the current slackens completely. Then you'll be stuck until dawn's first light. You lean back and let the incoming tide carry you, releasing the paddle to skim like a fishing line behind. The current's pull rocks the canoe in a steady roll, and you close your eyes, mapping the timing. Every few seconds, the rate of roll quickens, classic sign that the channel's narrowest constriction is just ahead. You prepare to paddle again, firing off 3 strong strokes to clear that pinch point before the backflow kicks in. As predicted, the water jolts, shifting direction. The tides turn, the pinnacle moment you've been waiting for. You feel the wave reverse under you and adapt instantly, angling the bow to meet it head-on. You ride that turning tide, paddling briskly to maintain momentum, and the channel widens behind you into a serene lagoon basin. You bank the canoe on the softer inner swell and touch bottom gently. No crunching coral, just the soft sigh of sand. You settle into the stillness, water at your waist, and grin at the sky. The tide diary has once again proven accurate. You rack up 2 more mental entries. Tonight's timing of low tide at 11:40 p.m., turn at 12:15 a.m. Speed of tidal flow peaked at 2.2 knots. Safe passage window 15 minutes. You'll rehearse these entries when you rest, weaving them deeper into your memory. Your crewmate lets out a relieved breath. You tease them. See? It's not magic. It's just moon math. The lagoon ahead is calm, lit by faint bioluminescent flickers dancing on the surface. Another fringe marvel some say can help confirm tidal slack times. Historians still argue whether early sailors used bioluminescence as a tide indicator or simply admired it. You lean forward, touching the glowing water, and paddle toward the safe harbor beyond. You pause, letting the canoe drift under the hush of night, eyes lifting from the water to the low-hanging cloud bank on the horizon. Island reflections. Tonight, They're your secret lighthouse, faint glimmers refracted on the underside of clouds that betray distant human settlements. You squint into the murk, searching for that telltale glow. It's subtle, a wash of warm amber, like a candle just below a lampshade. That's land talking in tongues. A mainstream fact: Pacific sailors of old knew that even when islands lay too low to spot by silhouette, their fires at dusk could reflect on cloud undersides, creating what they called sea halos. They used these halos to confirm course when stellar cues were obscured. You learned this from a revival navigator in Fiji, who held up a photo of a cloud lit from below, proof that even faint village lanterns become signposts. You lean forward, paddle resting lightly in your grasp. The glow flickers in time with something, maybe torches lit along a shoreline path. A fringe tale says some navigators could tell how many hearths were burning by the intensity of the halo, whispering, 10 fires to the north, 20 to the east. Historians still argue whether such exact counts were ever possible or just poetic exaggeration passed down in song. Your crewmate nudges you. You grin and murmur, bet their welcome party's already grilling fish, hope they've got extra lime. There's magic in this moment. Water, sky, and human light colluding to guide you home. You adjust your heading slightly eastward, noting that the glow intensifies on one edge of the cloud line. That asymmetry tells you which part of the island rim you're approaching. A second fringe detail. In some archipelagos, navigators painted reflective pigments on roofs, amplifying their glow to signal friendly vessels. Historians still argue whether these pigments were widespread or reserved for chiefs' villages, but you swallow that morsel of lore with fascination. The night air carries a faint scent of wood smoke, a subtle reminder that people live beyond this ocean expanse. You breathe it in. The balance of salt and smoke feels like progress. You reach a hand into the water, watching bioluminescent plankton flare at your touch, and think, nature's own mood lighting, teaming up with human beacons to say, you're close. You tap the hull twice, a coded signal to the crew that the island reflections are solid. No turning back now. You've detected the glow at an elevation of roughly 10 degrees above the horizon, enough to gauge distance. The lower the glow, the farther away. The higher, the nearer you get. You recall calibration drills. Elders burned fires at known shore points while canoes lay offshore. Trainees memorized elevation angles with shells placed on deck rails. By the time they voyaged alone, their eyes measured angles as precisely as any instrument. A third fringe rumor floats in your mind. Some say witches on remote islets could summon spirits to brighten their fires, creating false halos to lure unsuspecting canoes onto jagged reef. Historians still argue whether such tales served as cautionary folklore or reflected genuine subterfuge. You shake your head at the thought. You squint again, noting that the glow has shifted slightly northward. That means the canoe's drift has carried you east of your intended approach. You dip your paddle and nudge the bow back west, realigning so the reflections rest evenly under the cloud lip. Smooth paddle strokes, measured and patient, like writing a letter in water. Above, the stars will silently, but your focus remains on that low cloud horizon. Every few minutes, you peer through your fingers, charting the glow's movement. It crawls upward, rising into a brighter amber blotch. You estimate you're within 20 nautical miles. You remember that at 10 miles, the glow becomes half the sky's width, a bulky, inviting lantern. The air grows warmer as you near. Humidity thickens, carrying distant music beats, drums or laughter, it's hard to tell. Human presence, pulsing through the night. You lean into it, letting that glow be both map and welcome sign. You feel a wash of relief ripple through the crew. You're almost there. The halo intensifies further, revealing subtle color shifts, a cooler white on one side, a golden tinge on the other. That reveals two separate villages, each on different points of the island. You choose the smaller white glow, locals known for generous water offerings to tired sailors. Practicality meets camaraderie. You bring the canoe around, paddling toward the brightest patch. Waves slosh softly against the hull. The cloud reflection now dominates your field of vision. No need to look up at stars. You smile in the dark, grateful for this final piece of the navigational puzzle. You settle into a comfortable crouch, letting your knees absorb the canoe's sway as you press your palm flat against the taut hull. Canoe resonance. Tonight, it's your tactile stethoscope, tuning into the vibrations that ripple through the wood when waves interact with underwater slopes and reefs. You close your eyes and breathe, feeling the hull's subtle hum beneath your fingers, like a stringed instrument singing notes pressed into the water. The first sensation is a low, rolling thrum, steady and even, telltale of deep ocean swell coursing beneath you. Then comes a higher frequency ping, a delicate chime that repeats in soft intervals. That's the reef slope ahead. As waves pass over a gradient of coral and sand, they compress and decompress, sending micro-vibrations up through the keel and into the hull. A mainstream fact: traditional Polynesian carpenter navigators selected specific native woods, breadfruit or candlenut, for hulls because their grain-transmitted underwater sounds best, enhancing canoe resonance techniques that remain in practice among voyaging societies today. You lean further forward, adjusting your weight so that the hull flexes against your palm just enough to amplify those resonance patterns. You feel a sweet spot, a point where the low rumble and high ping overlap, creating a richer tone. That overlap marks the contour where the reef's maximum slope meets the open ocean. You tighten your core and straighten your arm, letting the paddle drag lightly in the water to maintain balance without dampening the hull's song. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some elder navigators claimed that by sipping saltwater laced with crushed coconut husk, they could sharpen their skin sensitivity to hull vibrations. Historians still argue whether this practice was ritual or placebo. You suppress a grin. You're here on water alone, no husk-enhanced concoctions required. Your own skin has learned this song by heart. You shift your feet, angling the canoe ever so slightly starboard. The resonance changes. The chime grows clearer, more staccato. You nod once, a silent cue to your crewmate. Who needs a metal detector when you've got resonance sonar? They chuckle in the darkness, understanding you're mapping the underwater topography blindfolded. The hum beneath you deepens as the slope steepens. You tuck your head close to the hull, imagining the coral ridge stretching out ahead like a submerged mountain range. Each vibration pulse is a contour line on your mental chart. You can see the rise and fall of the seabed in the way the wood trembles, gentle peaks and valleys dancing beneath your palm. As you glide past the slope's apex, the resonance pattern shifts abruptly. The ping fades into a whisper as the underwater ridge levels off into a sandy plain. You straighten, letting the paddle fall silent. You've crossed the critical gradient and slipped into deeper channel waters. The canoe hums a uniform tone again, proof you're in safe passage. You straighten and gaze up at the starfield, the quiet triumph warming your chest. Canoe resonance just confirmed your position without a single star sighting. You tap the hull twice, your coded way of marking passage complete. You settle into the gentle rocking of the canoe, letting its steady motion lull your mind into the deep groove of mnemonic rhythms. Oral atlases. Tonight, you're carrying centuries of chants woven into your voice, verses that map oceans instead of paper. You inhale the night air, thick with salt and possibility, and prepare to recite lines that guide you more surely than any chart. Your chant begins quietly, each phrase marking a course correction or a landmark in the vast blue. A mainstream fact: in many Pacific cultures, navigational knowledge was encoded in song, complex chants listing star sequences, swell directions, and island names that trained your memory as effectively as ink on parchment. You learned your first chant at dawn on a windswept beach, your uncle's baritone voice rolling out the words like stones skipping across a reef. The chorus unfolds: when Klee climbs beyond the reef of winds, turn west by southwest. You repeat it softly, matching each syllable to the paddle stroke, embedding the path into muscle memory. Fringe tidbit: some elder chanters added subtle tempo changes, accelerating on lines about dangerous reefs or slowing during verses about serene lagoons. Historians still argue whether these tempo shifts were deliberate mnemonic devices or grew naturally from storytelling flair. You feel the power of song ripple through the crew. Each person softly echoes a line, voices blending into a hushed polyphony that rides the waves. This is more than entertainment, it's a living map sewn into your synapses. A single mispronounced syllable could tilt your heading by degrees, carrying you off course by hundreds of miles. You smile at that gravity. Your chant shifts to a new verse detailing the swell shadows that betray hidden shoals. You feel the words unlocking mental diagrams. Listen for the south swell's half-beat echo as it bends round coral teeth. You synchronize the chant's cadence with your heartbeat, reinforcing the link between rhythm and direction. You remember how, as a child, you tried to invent your own verses, only to be gently corrected by elders who insisted that each line must carry precise meaning. That discipline shaped you into a navigator who sings with intention, not whimsy. The chant carries on, switching to celestial cues. You enunciate the star names with care, Kalu Matariki, Puana, each syllable a brushstroke on an invisible map. A mainstream fact here, some Polynesian chants contained embedded star compass grids, referencing up to 30 different stars, each assigned to a direction and subsector of the ocean. You learn to imagine a spider's web of constellations overhead, anchored by these verses. And yet, there's room for play. Fringe practitioners sometimes wrote jester verses, light-hearted quips tucked between serious lines to ease tension on long voyages. You slip one in, when the swell whispers misspelled names, blame the coconuts cliches. It makes you grin. The chant winds into the section on wave posters, mental drawings of swell intersections, converted into words. Swells long and slow meet short and sharp, forming mountain spikes you ride like memory arches. As you recite, you trace invisible patterns in the air with your finger, drawing the ocean's diagrams above the water's mirror. The crew watches your movements, internalizing the map in body and mind. Historians still argue whether these verses were standardized across islands or unique to each voyaging lineage. You know both happen. Some chants echo ocean-wide, while others remain secret within a single family. You learned a few of those hush-hush stanzas, phrases that guide only the most trusted paddlers. You tuck them away in your pocket of song, a private tool should you ever need it. You pause the chant briefly to take a drink of water. The silence that follows is telling. The absence of song would leave you adrift. But the tune returns, deeper now, weaving in mnemonic images of driftwood landmarks. Breadfruit logs with barnacle eyes point to the eastbound rise. You almost laugh at the absurdity of describing barnacles as eyes, but the imagery nails itself in your mind. The verses now list the sequence of wind voices. First the mahas of dawn, then the canticle at dusk. Flee the whispering west lest storms betray your trust. As you speak, whispering west, you lean into the mild breeze that has been tracking with you, as if to punctuate the warning. The crew's voices follow in unison, a chorus more powerful than any single instrument. You recall an initiation ceremony where you first performed this chant alone, the entire village watching in hushed awe. Your voice cracked on the tricky middle verse about reef echoes, but your heart held steady. That moment cemented your identity as a navigator, not just a paddler. The memory echoes in your chest as you continue shaping sound into direction. Historians still argue whether these chants originated purely as mnemonic devices or were musical prayers asking the gods for safe passage. You lean toward both. In your experience, repetition felt devotional, a way of honoring ancestors and the sea itself. The chant flows into its final movement, island names strung like pearls on a line: Tonga, Niue, Tongatapu, Fakafo, each syllable a waypoint. As you voice them, you picture their shapes on the blank ocean canvas, mentally connecting dots in an invisible constellation of land. You merge chant and chart. The tapestry of word and thought becomes one. Your crewmate leans close and whispers, "I never thought I'd memorize a whole route in song." You smile, replying under your breath, "Best playlist ever, right?" With the last verse sung, the canoe drifts in a moment of hush, charged with anticipation. The map resides fully in your mind now. Swells, stars, drifts, winds, reefs, tides, and distant lights, all encoded in melody and memory. You end the chant softly, letting the final syllable fade into the night as if barely uttered. A single beat of silence follows, and you know it's time. You guide the paddle into the water, voice still humming the verses as you slip forward into the next stage of your voyage, carried by the power of song. You settle deeper into the groove of the canoe's motion, limbs loose and mind alert, as you prepare to sketch wave portraits, mental diagrams of complex swell intersections etched on the ocean's canvas. The night air is cool, carrying the faint hum of distant surf, and you close your eyes for a moment, letting your other senses sharpen. When you open them, you see the sea not as water but as overlapping fields of energy, each swell a brushstroke in a vast, living painting. Your primary swell, a long, languid pulse from the southeast, forms the backbone of your canvas. Across it, shorter, sharper waves from the northeast slice in, creating a lattice of peaks and troughs. Wave portraits. Tonight, you're translating that lattice into a map. You draw an invisible grid in the air, horizontal lines tracking the southeast swells, vertical ones for the northeastern ones. Where they intersect, you imagine little pyramids rising on the water, clapotis, each one a waypoint. A mainstream fact: earlier voyaging masters taught apprentices to memorize up to 12 intersecting swell patterns, assigning each a shape, triangles, diamonds, hexagons, that corresponded to known island clusters. You learned these in your first training voyage, tracing the shapes on a palm frond with your finger until they burnt into your memory. A fringe tidbit: some navigators claimed they could see ghost swells, remnants of past storms that lingered beneath the surface, shifting the portraits in ways only the most attuned eyes noticed. Historians still argue whether these were genuine subsurface waves or metaphorical echoes of collective memory. You lift your hand, tracing the outline of a large diamond formed by two long swells crossing with two shorter ones. That diamond marks a submerged ridge you must avoid, one that channels waves into a narrow corridor. You visualize steering the canoe just outside the diamond's edge, where the water is steadier. With practiced ease, you angle your paddle strokes to guide the hull along that safe margin. Your crewmate watches, silent and focused, as you continue. You map a series of triangles pointing toward the northwest, each one signaling a gap between reef outcroppings. You recall a demonstration where elders released dye at specific reef channels to highlight those triangles, making them visible for apprentices. Tonight, you see them by feel and reflection alone. Drawing next, you outline a row of small hexagons clustered east of your current position. Those mark shoaling zones where waves bunch up before cresting. You tense your arms, ready to adjust course if the hexagon pattern sharpens, indicating shallow water ahead. It doesn't, yet. You breathe out, tracing the final hexagon before moving on. A third fringe detail: in some islands, teenage navigators would paint wave patterns on their forearms to practice imperceptible shifts, as if their own bodies became walking charts. Historians still argue whether these were practical aids or coming-of-age rituals. You combine your wave portrait with driftwood landmarks and celestial crossings still fresh in memory. The portrait's diamond ridge aligns with the crossing of Rohua and Matarali earlier, confirming you're on the correct latitude. The hexagon shoals correspond to the reef echoes you heard, their positions matching the resonance pattern you traced. Your mental map is complete, an overlay of multiple data streams. You tilt your head, listening to the swell's cadence. Each pyramid peak tilts slightly north, signaling a subtle shift in the current. You redraw your portrait, shift the grid half a degree, adjust the canoe's heading, and feel the hull sigh in relief. You've refined your route without a compass. As you settle back, the wave portrait recedes into memory, a transparent film over the live sea. You'll carry it until landfall, refreshing it whenever swells realign. For now, you rest in the harmony of intersecting waves, confident that your invisible map will guide you home. You lean back against the canoe's rail, gaze drifting upward where the star clusters hang like silent sentinels, and feel the familiar tug of recognition as you invoke star name mnemonics, stitching personal stories to celestial points so that you never lose your way. Each star has a spoken name, a tale you learned as a child paddling under this very sky. You begin softly, your voice merging with the sea breeze. Puana, you murmur, recalling how its bright formation reminded your grandmother of her childhood dance partner, his broad shoulders and quick steps tracing that very cluster. To you, Puana signifies steadfast direction. Every time you name it, you remember that steady shuffle, and your hands on the paddle straighten in response. A mainstream fact: Polynesian star compasses often included over 30 named stars, each tied to a specific bearing and season, forming a navigational grid that rivaled any instrument. Your crewmate listens as you continue. Kaulu, meaning two birds, conjures the legend of twin frigate birds that led a lost voyager home. You picture those birds wheeling just above the wave crests, their dark silhouettes cutting against the dawn glow. You've woven Kaulu into your route. When it soars directly over your prow, you know you're aligned south of your target island. Fringe lore insists that some navigators whispered these bird names to the stars themselves, as if the sky were alive, Historians still argue whether such rituals were literal or symbolic. You smile at the thought. Next comes Matariki, the Pleiades, your own secret constellation of childhood promises. You learned to cite Matariki's rise and fall as a seasonal clock, but you added your own twist. Each star in the cluster represents a member of your training crew, embedding their voices in your memory. When you call out, hello, Hina, Niho, Tama, Roa, and Hoku, you're not just memorizing positions but honoring friendships that buoy you across lonely nights. That personal link makes the cluster impossible to forget. You shift your weight to watch Rohua slide toward the southern horizon. The tale you tied to it involves a wandering chief who followed its blood-red glow to new lands. You recite in a low voice, Rohua guides through autumn's deep. As you speak, your paddling hand adjusts ever so slightly, compensating for a minor current shift. That mnemonic phrase is both poetry and precision. Historians still argue whether these mnemonic lines were standardized or improvised by each navigator, but you know the improvisation makes them more powerful for you. You pause to sip water, eyes never leaving the sky. The stars above seem to pulse in response. You lean forward, fingertips brushing the gunnel, and continue. Pu'u-e, named for a sacred hill on your home island, stands at true east. Its pronunciation, 3 syllables hugging an open vowel, rolls off your tongue and cements its bearing. The shape of the name echoes its star pattern, a gentle arc followed by a sharp spike. You picture drawing it in the air, each syllable mapping to a flare of starlight. The sky is your script now. You call out, Humu, tying it to the song your aunt used to sing at dusk, its melody shaped like the star's hidden cluster. When Humu dips below the horizon, you know to increase your paddling cadence for the next leg. That association, music to motion, makes the star's setting as vivid as any instrument. You feel the ocean's breath synchronizing with your heartbeat as you move through the night. The final star of your mnemonic set is La-A, the sun's twin, a cluster used as a dawn marker. You speak its name slowly. La-A. The drawn-out pronunciation mimics sunrise itself. As word and wave align, you sense the first pale light creeping along the edge of the sky. You settle your voice into a hum, letting the names drift through the crew like a prayer. Each star name mnemonic is a personal talisman, ensuring that when the sky dims with clouds or the horizon blurs, your memory can still reconstruct the constellations. You've turned navigation into a tapestry of story, song, and sensation, an atlas woven into your bones. Now, as the eastern sky brightens imperceptibly, you feel the power of these names anchoring you. You reach for your paddle with renewed confidence, guided by the soft echo of star names ringing in your mind. You lean back against the canoe's rail, gaze drifting upward where the star clusters hang like silent sentinels, and feel the familiar tug of recognition as you invoke star name mnemonics, stitching personal stories to celestial points so that you never lose your way. Each star has a spoken name, a tale you learned as a child paddling under this very sky. You begin softly, your voice merging with the sea breeze. Puana, you murmur, recalling how its bright formation reminded your grandmother of her childhood dance partner, his broad shoulders and quick steps tracing that very cluster. To you, Puana signifies steadfast direction. Every time you name it, you remember that steady shuffle, and your hands on the paddle straighten in response. A mainstream fact: Polynesian star compasses often included over 30 named stars, each tied to a specific bearing and season, forming a navigational grid that rivaled any instrument. Your crewmate listens as you continue. Kaulu, meaning 2 birds, conjures the legend of twin frigate birds that led a lost voyager home. You picture those birds wheeling just above the wave crests, their dark silhouettes cutting against the dawn glow. You've woven Kaulu into your route. When it soars directly over your prow, you know you're aligned south of your target island. Fringe lore insists that some navigators whispered these bird names to the stars themselves, as if the sky were alive. Historians still argue whether such rituals were literal or symbolic. You smile at the thought. Next comes Matariki, the Pleiades, your own secret constellation of childhood promises. You learned to cite Matariki's rise and fall as a seasonal clock, but you added your own twist. Each star in the cluster represents a member of your training crew, embedding their voices in your memory. When you call out, hello, Hina, Niho, Tama, Roa, and Hoku, you're not just memorizing positions but honoring friendships that buoy you across lonely nights. That personal link makes the cluster impossible to forget. You shift your weight to watch Rohua slide toward the southern horizon. The tale you tie to it involves a wandering chief who followed its blood-red glow to new lands. You recite in a low voice, Rohua guides through autumn's deep. As you speak, your paddling hand adjusts ever so slightly, compensating for a minor current shift. That mnemonic phrase is both poetry and precision. Historians still argue whether these mnemonic lines were standardized or improvised by each navigator, but you know the improvisation makes them more powerful for you. You pause to sip water, eyes never leaving the sky. The stars above seem to pulse in response. You lean forward, fingertips brushing the gunnel, and continue. Pu'u-e, named for a sacred hill on your home island, stands at true east. Its pronunciation, 3 syllables hugging an open vowel, rolls off your tongue and cements its bearing. The shape of the name echoes its star pattern, a gentle arc followed by a sharp spike. You picture drawing it in the air, each syllable mapping to a flare of starlight. The sky is your script now. You call out, Humu, tying it to the song your aunt used to sing at dusk, its melody shaped like the star's hidden cluster. When Humu dips below the horizon, you know to increase your paddling cadence for the next leg. That association, music to motion, makes the star's setting as vivid as any instrument. You feel the ocean's breath synchronizing with your heartbeat as you move through the night. The final star of your mnemonic set is La-A, the sun's twin, a cluster used as a dawn marker. You speak its name slowly. La-A. The drawn-out pronunciation mimics sunrise itself. As word and wave align, you sense the first pale light creeping along the edge of the sky. You settle your voice into a hum, letting the names drift through the crew like a prayer. Each star name mnemonic is a personal talisman, ensuring that when the sky dims with clouds or the horizon blurs, your memory can still reconstruct the constellations. You've turned navigation into a tapestry of story, song, and sensation, an atlas woven into your bones. Now, as the eastern sky brightens imperceptibly, you feel the power of these names anchoring you. You reach for your paddle with renewed confidence, guided by the soft echo of star names ringing in your mind. You sit cross-legged in the prow, moonlight pooling around you like liquid silver, and close your eyes, letting the canoe's gentle sway carry your thoughts backward through time. Ocean memory logs. Tonight, you're replaying your entire voyage in your mind's eye, stitching together star paths, swell patterns, driftwood cues, and tidal shifts into a seamless film that primes you for the next expedition. You begin at the moment of departure, footsteps on wet sand, heart racing as stars wink awake overhead. Your first mental frame is that familiar stillness before the canoe slides into the surf. You see yourself gripping the gunnel, feeling the sand shift under the hull, tasting salt on your lips before the breeze takes over. You recall the precise position of the Southern Cross when you pushed off, its 4 stars aligned like arrowheads pointing toward home. You trace that arrow in your mind, overlaying it with the rise point of Rohua, imagining your paddle slicing through swell shadows as you glide away from land. Next, you replay the wave alphabet sequence, the long primary swell from the southeast, the secondary pulses crossing from the northeast, each intersection forming memory-shaped diamonds on the water. You feel the way your knees bent to absorb the clapotis, the way your grip hardened on the paddle when the cross swell threatened to tilt the canoe. You watch your own reflection on the hull, eyes narrowed, jaw set, and hear your own voice whisper the warning your mentor taught you. Trust the bumps, not the breeze. You shift to driftwood landmarks, that twisted vine you spotted 6 hours out, its bark scored with barnacle scars like a fingerprint. You replay the moment you leaned over the side to inspect it, lifting it by its knot and holding it aloft to catch starlight. You remember estimating its 30-day drift, the chill lancing through your arms as you realized you'd averaged a perfect pace. In your mind, you turn the canoe a hair starboard, as you did then, watching the branch edge past your bow toward its origin islands. The film cuts to reef echoes, you pressing an ear to the hull and listening to the reef's applause echo beneath the water. You mentally amplify the staccato pops, imagine them color-coded, bright yellow for coral tongues, deep blue for sandy mouths, and see the underwater topography unfolding like a relief map. You feel your palm tingle with resonance as you recalibrate your direction by 2 degrees whenever the echoes sharpened. Then the tide diary sequence unfolds. Notations on finger width changes in water height every 20 minutes. The coconut shell microphone amplifying the incoming ebb. You replay your own finger tracing invisible numbers on the deck. 11:40 p.m. low tide, 12:15 a.m. turn, 15-minute window, and witness yourself paddling through the gap as the channel yawned open. You hear your own laughter at the moment you teased your crewmate. It's just moon math, and feel the buoyant relief as you slipped into the lagoon. Your mind's camera pans upward to the chant you sang under the stars. Syllables mapping swell shadows, star names, driftwood lore. You see lips moving in harmony with your small crew, voices rising and falling like ocean hymns. You recall your grandmother's baritone guiding you through the tricky verse about hidden shoals, your own vow to never let a mispronunciation send you astray. You drop into the coral calendar scene, plankton glowing around your paddle, the water's warmth signaling mass spawning. You replay tasting a drop of gamete water, sweet, briny, and nod to yourself as you memorized the precise spawn timing relative to the full moon and spring equinox. The bioluminescent flickers in your vision become a ticker tape of seasonal markers. Next, you scroll through your wave portrait gallery. Invisible grids traced in mid-air, diamonds and hexagons marking ridges and shoals. You watch your own fingers drawing each shape and sense the pride in nailing every contour without a single visual reference. Star name mnemonics flicker into view. Puana danced beside Kaulu, Matariki's friendly cluster glowing above Humu and Lae. You speak each name aloud in your mind, Puana, Kaulu, Matariki, and feel the alignment settle in your bones. You recall improvising verses for each star, weaving personal anecdotes that turned constellations into trusted crewmates. Finally, you sweep through the island reflections tableau, amber halos warming the undersides of low clouds, reflective pigments glinting like distant campfires. You see the canoe's prow slicing through moonlit calm toward that glow, your own heartbeat syncing with its pulse. As your mental voyage nears its end, you review any missteps, moments when cloud cover nearly obscured a key star, or when driftwood clusters threw you off by a few degrees. But you also see how you corrected, by triangulating with wind lyrics or reef echoes, and each correction reinforces your learning. The final frame is dawn breaking over the atoll, soft light unveiling lagoons of turquoise and emerald. You see yourself landing the canoe gently on sand, feet wet and salt-crusted, the entire journey freshly imprinted in your memory log. You open your eyes in the present, chest warm with anticipation. Your ocean memory log has rehearsed itself brilliantly. You're ready to sail again, confident that your mind can replay every ripple, every star, and every breath of wind when you set out tomorrow night. You drift beneath a veil of midnight quiet, the moon tracing pale lines across the water, and sense the canoe's breath in perfect harmony with your own. Shared silence is the unspoken bond that courses between you and your paddling partners, an invisible rhythm guiding each stroke. You close your eyes, trusting the steady thrum of paddles dipping in unison to carry you forward. There's no chatter now, just the soft slap of blades and the gentle sway of the hull. A mainstream fact. In many Pacific voyaging traditions, navigators emphasized silence during night watches so that every creak, bird call, or distant wave echo could be heard. This practice remains integral to modern voyaging societies, where crews often observe silent watches to maintain situational awareness and collective focus. You feel that discipline tether you to your crew, each heartbeat aligning through unspoken cues. The first thing you notice is the tempo. 3 strokes on your left, 1 pause, 2 on your right. It's the pattern your partner fell into hours ago when you first set out. You match it instinctively, your muscles' memory syncing without conscious thought. That pause between strokes feels pregnant with possibility, a tiny pocket of time where the ocean whispers secrets you alone could decipher. A fringe tidbit. Some elders maintain that during these shared silences, navigators could hear each other's intentions, almost telepathically anticipating when a teammate would tire or need a shift. Historians still argue whether this is a mythic flourish or evidence of deeply ingrained nonverbal communication techniques. You lean into that idea, trusting your crewmates like extensions of your own limbs. You feel the canoe lilt slightly as your inner paddler tires, a subtle shift of weight that would pass unnoticed by most. But you sense it, and without a word, you ease your grip on the opposite side, sharing the workload in perfect equilibrium. The stars overhead seem to dim in reverence to your quiet collaboration. You recall how, earlier in your training, your mentor would hold up a hand mid-paddle and the crew would halt instantly, breathing in concert, recalibrating to the night's pulse. That exercise drove home a lesson: words can muddy the water, silence sharpens it. You listen to the water curving beneath the hull as you shift your torso in unison, each tilt a shared breath. There's an intimacy here, a trust forged not through contracts but through countless silent exchanges. You sense your partner preparing for relief in a few minutes, and you tighten your core to cover the extra strokes without breaking rhythm. Silence also heightens everyday details: the faint scrape of coral beneath, the hushed cry of a night bird, even the whisper of your own pulse in your temples. You hush your own thoughts, letting the collective awareness take over. A single exhale might sound like a clap of thunder out here, so you keep to steady inhales and controlled exhales, matching your breath to the slide of the hull. That moment of shared silence is punctuated only by a distant splash, perhaps a fish breaking the surface or a wayward paddle dip. You glance at your crewmate, they glance back. No words needed. You both know, water direction has shifted slightly. You both adjust, shifting forward a few inches to bring the canoe back into perfect trim. There's a fringe belief that during deep night watches, some navigators would enter a meditative trance, communicating via subtle hand signals embedded in paddle gestures. Historians still argue whether those signals were systematic or improvised in the moment. You tuck that thought away, focusing instead on the simple truth: your shared silence is the map that keeps you together. You sense fatigue creeping in, arms burning, eyes heavy, but the silence holds you buoyant. You feel the canoe's forward momentum as a shared heartbeat, a collective reassurance that you're never truly alone. And in this quiet communion, you find both solace and strength. First light is hours away, yet you already know you'll remember this night, not for the distance covered, but for the trust woven between every silent stroke. You close your eyes for a heartbeat, letting the lull cradle you, secure in the knowledge that when words fail, your unity will speak volumes. You press your hands flat against the cool deck as the canoe's bow rises to meet a sudden swell. This is no ordinary night. Trials and tests have shaped you, forged your skill through initiation voyages that pushed your body, mind, and spirit to their limits. Tonight, that legacy echoes beneath your hands, a reminder that every challenge you've endured was designed to prove you worthy of these waters. Your first test came years ago on a moonless voyage stripped of all comforts. You were 19, raw with ambition but thin on experience. The elders handed you only a broken paddle and told you to navigate a 2-day leg between islands using nothing but your memory log and body's instinct. A mainstream fact: traditional Pacific initiation rites often included solo passages of 50 to 100 miles without food rations, testing navigators' endurance and mastery of star compasses. When you embarked, your heart thundered. By the second night, you were paddling blind through rain squalls, every sense screaming fatigue. Yet you endured, mapping the swell alphabet by touch and tasting saltwater swirls to confirm current shifts. Emerging on shore, shaky but triumphant, you carried the ancestral torch into your veins. Since then, each trial layered new knowledge. There was the reef gauntlet, navigating a maze of narrow coral channels at dawn's half-light, when shadows twisted and hides drew close. You learned to interpret reef echoes so precisely that you threaded passages no wider than a cradle. Fringe whispers claim some navigators timed their heartbeat to the reef staccato, paddling only on silent beats to avoid detection by hostile currents. Historians still argue whether those techniques were practical or metaphorical bravado. You practiced until your chest and canoe resonated as one. You remember the wave portrait challenge, recounted among apprentices as the painter's trial. Elders unleashed 3 overlapping swells of different periods, then instructed novices to trace their intersections in the air: diamond, hexagon, and triangle formations marking hidden shoals. Only those who drew every shape without hesitation advanced. You failed twice, your mind muddled by exhaustion. On the third attempt, you closed your eyes and envisioned the ocean's invisible map, letting muscle memory guide your fingers to perfect wave portraits. That moment etched a lesson: navigation is as much art as science. The most grueling test was the storm passage, when you and 2 other fledgling navigators were tasked with crossing a storm-lashed channel under the fury of gale winds. You huddled in the lee of the outrigger, paddling in synchronized bursts to ride swell shadows safely through. The wind lyrics you'd learned, voices in the breeze, became your only guide, muffled amid thunder but discernible by pitch and timbre. A crack of lightning revealed the churning reef crest for an instant. You steered by that flash and a whisper of wind, threading the canoe through a gauntlet of breakers. When you landed bruised but alive, the elders welcomed you as a navigator of true metal. Each test demanded integration of every cue you'd mastered: celestial crossings, driftwood landmarks, cloud cartography, and echo resonance. Failure meant humiliation. Success meant belonging. You bear the scars, blisters, bruises, sleepless eyes, as badges of honor, reminders that mastery requires sacrifice. Now, under this silent sky, you recognize the culmination of those trials. A sudden shift in the swell intersection warns of submerged shoals. You recall your painter's trial and adjust course. A faint reef echo prompts you to cup your ear against the hull, invoking memories of gauntlet runs. You whisper wind lyrics to steady your pulse as clouds gather on the horizon, echoing storm passage nights. Every fiber of your being vibrates with the interwoven lessons of past tests. As you paddle in measured strokes, you feel the weight of ancestral expectation and the exhilaration of proven competence. You smile in the dark, for you are no novice. You are the living sum of every trial faced and conquered. Tonight, the ocean is not a challenge but a familiar partner, acknowledging your skill with each gentle breath against the hull. You sit in the prow as the first pale light of dawn nudges the horizon, the sea around you shifting from velvet black to steel gray, and feel a deep resonance in your chest. This is the legacy of light, where modern voyagers honor ancestral wave readers by reviving traditional ways. You dip your fingers into the gentle swell, tasting salt and possibility, and reflect on how every technique you wield tonight is an echo of those who came before. A mainstream fact: today's Polynesian voyaging societies sail double-hulled canoes on grand expeditions across thousands of miles of ocean without instruments, relying on star compasses, swell reading, and oral knowledge passed down in living archives, efforts that have restored cultural pride and navigational mastery lost for centuries. You close your eyes and feel the pulse of those revival voyages, like Clee's triumphant return to Hawaii, the way it sang across waves after an 80-year navigation hiatus. You run a finger along the hull, recalling driftwood charts and star mnemonics, and smile at how young apprentices now learn these skills in community workshops on distant shores. Fringe tidbit: some revival crews light ceremonial oil lamps at night, spaced in patterns that mimic ancient island clusters on water. Historians still argue whether these lantern star maps were ever actual teaching tools or modern inventions to galvanize cultural resurgence. Your paddle cuts the water in smooth strokes, and you think of the cloud reading classes held on windy atolls, where children learn to spot lenticular formations as markers of high-altitude winds. You remember teaching guests to listen for the reef echoes against the hull, inviting skeptics to feel the vibrations that spoke of hidden shoals. You catch sight of a visiting sailor from a faraway port, tracing star paths with the same reverence you learned from your grandmother. You lift your hand in greeting, no words needed. You share a silent oath to keep the ancient map alive. You adjust your course by a hair's breadth to match the swell shadows exactly as your ancestors taught you, feeling the canoe settle into the corridor. You think of the growing network of navigators across the Pacific who meet annually under different skies to exchange wave portraits and chant atlases, bridging vast distances with shared knowledge. Historians still argue whether early trans-Pacific contacts relied more on drift voyages or intentional exploration, but tonight you know both are true. As sunlight breaks golden across the water, you sense the final phase of your journey approaching, landing at an island settlement eager to greet you. You'll carry with you the techniques of star crossings, driftwood landmarks, wind lyrics, and coral calendars, each a thread in the tapestry of light that guides voyagers home. You press your hand to the hull one last time, sending gratitude through wood and water, honoring those who first listened to the ocean's song. First light glints on the distant shore. You rise to a kneel, ready to land. Your mind hums with the living legacy you uphold. You are the link between past and present, a wave reader carrying ancestral light into tomorrow's voyages. You drift in gentle quiet as the canoe comes to rest on the soft sand, every muscle unwinding in surrender to the day's first light. The horizon blushes slowly, stretching like a yawn across the sky, and you feel your breath deepen, matching the ocean's calm exhale. Each wave now laps the shore in a steady, soothing rhythm, a lullaby that carries you from the edges of wakefulness into a place of warm comfort. Your body feels weightless as you step onto the landing beach, the grains of sand cool beneath your feet, reminding you of every moment spent balancing on rolling swells under starlit skies. You carry the memory of hundreds of intersecting waves, of driftwood markers guiding your way, and of chants woven into your very breath. Yet in this soft glow, those memories feel like gentle echoes rather than commands, invitations rather than demands. You bend to scoop a handful of water from the lagoon, letting it trickle through your fingers, each drop a small reminder that you are both shaped by and shaping these currents. In this tender hour, you release any tension still lingering in your shoulders, inviting warmth to replace it, a slow unfolding of peace that begins at your core and spreads outward. The scent of salt and blossom drifts on the breeze, mingling with the faint sweetness of drying palm fronds. You close your eyes and inhale, tasting the quiet gift of arrival. The work of navigation is done. Now there is only the soft touch of time unhurried, the steady promise of renewal carried on every breath. You sit on the sand, back against the canoe's warm hull, and allow your mind to soften, drifting through traces of song, star names, and tidal rhythms, each detail floating away like petals on the water. There is no rush, no need to hold any one image. You simply are, cradled by sea and sky. In this hushed dawn, you feel the lineage of voyagers behind you, their voices woven into your own calm, guiding you not forward but inward. And in that guiding hush, you rest.